What's going on? Welcome into the first ever episode of In the Game with Matt Miguez. I am Matt Miguez. Happy to be here with you on this Thursday afternoon as we are recording this. The New Orleans Saints dropped some big news today. Their offensive staff is very quickly getting put together in quite a big way. Still waiting on the defensive staff, which some people view that is the most important with an offensive-minded head coach, but we'll get to that here in just a second. Joining us to talk all things New Orleans Saints is our guy, the host of the Locked On Saints podcast, Mr. Ross Jackson. Ross, you are the first guest on In the Game. Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I am honored. I'm doing great. I was already great, but now I get to be the first guest, and now I'm greater. So I'm glad to be here with you, man. Thank you for having me on.
I'm happy to have you. Look, let's talk about the New Orleans Saints and the moves that they've made ever since signing or hiring Kellen Moore as their head coach. You know, you bring in a ton of familiar faces for Kellen Moore. You bring in Scott Tolzien as the quarterback's coach. You bring in, today you announced Doug Nussmeier as his offensive coordinator, who was a quarterback's coach for the Philadelphia Eagles. You bring in a great director of sports science in Todd Rath, who, you know, you might know him as the Sean McVay get-back guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just tons of great moves that the Saints have made early on. What are your kind of general thoughts on the way that Kellen has assembled this staff over the last couple of days?
Yeah, I think when it comes to the offensive staff, he's done a good job checking the boxes that he needs to check. Am I going to sit here with you today, Matt, and say that based on these coach hirings that the Saints are going to be a playoff team in 2025? No, probably not, right? But I also think that's okay. I think the big thing that you're looking at with this coaching staff is that you have a nice blend of different levels of experience, a nice blend of people that have been here in New Orleans versus those that haven't, those that are familiar with the New Orleans Saints versus those that are familiar with Kellen Moore. I think there's a lot of nice blend of perspectives and experience levels and familiarity and everything to allow for Kellen Moore to be able to build an offense that he wants to build with guys that speak his language, guys that already speak the players' languages. Like, I think that's really important to be able to communicate things back and forth. And then you add in the Doug Nussmeier piece, who's not by any stretch of the imagination going to be like a figurehead offensive coordinator. He won't be a play caller. He won't be an architect of the offense, but he's going to have a big role a la Pete Carmichael with Sean Payton of installing the offense, translating the offense, probably helping with some of the game plan stuff. And so I really like the hires that Kellen Moore has made so far because they're the hires that he needs. It's a wide swath of experience, and it's guys that he's familiar with, which I think goes a really long way for a first-time head coach.
And, you know, we brought up the guys that he's brought to Philadelphia, or brought from Philadelphia, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
How about the one guy that hasn't come with him from Philadelphia so far, in running backs coach Joel Thomas? And the importance of this is he was with the Saints from 2015 to 2023. Left last year to take the same job with the New York Giants. And now that Dennis Allen has been fired and Kellen Moore is the new head coach, they're bringing him back to New Orleans, a guy that, you know, Alvin Kamara is incredibly comfortable with, helped Alvin Kamara develop into, at the time before he suffered a couple of injuries, was one of the best running backs in the entire league. How important was that move for Kellen Moore and Mickey Loomis to make to bring him back to New Orleans?
I think that's a really important one. And I think that he's one of those guys that helps to translate the scheme, the system, all that from the face of your franchise on the offensive side in Alvin Kamara to your head coach and vice versa. I think that this was a really smart hire. You'll notice that the two best players on offense, the two kind of superstar level players on offense, whether potential or already proven, Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave. Chris Olave's wide receiver coach stays. Alvin Kamara's running back coach comes back. I think that's a really wise move by the New Orleans Saints. It's a wise move by Kellen Moore as well. And I think that it also lends to the idea that this offense might not be run first in 2025. I think that's going to depend on the quarterback situation, but it'll be run heavy. And I think that that's something that you're looking forward to seeing if you're a New Orleans Saints fan, because Kellen Moore does a very good job of diversifying his run game, making it unpredictable, and you want the right guys around to help to coach that. One of the other additions that I really like coming over from the Eagles, former run game coordinator, assistant offensive line coach going from there, and TJ Paganetti, somebody that I really, really like them adding to the staff. I don't know exactly what his title is going to be just yet, But whether you're looking at his overlap and partnership with one of the best, if not the best offensive line coaches in the NFL and Jeffrey Stoutland, that moves the needle. And then also your ability to be able to coordinate that run game, that moves the needle as well. And so I think that in concert with the Joel Thomas addition, huge for New Orleans in terms of what they're going to look like on offense in 2025.
Ross, staying on that same topic, correct me if I'm wrong here. Kellen Moore was a quarterback. Doug Nussmeier was a quarterback.
Yep.
Scott Tolzien was a quarterback. Something's telling me that the quarterback position is going to be an emphasis here in New Orleans during Kellen Moore's tenure. I just have a thought.
Yeah. I think the thing that it shows you, too, is that they plan to develop a quarterback at some point, whether that is happening in the background or whether that's happening as that person is starting. I think that this coaching staff plans either for 2025 or 2026 to get started with the development of a young passer. I think that's what that tells you. You have the winningest quarterback in college football history now as your head coach. You have a guy like Doug Nussmeier, who has been a quarterback in New Orleans in terms of starting his career. You have a guy like Scott Tolzien, who's done it all over the place and has been the quarterback coach for Dak Prescott over the course of the past 2 seasons. You look at the experience that Doug Nussmeier has. Scott Tolzien, the guy that stepped into Doug Nussmeier's shoes when he left to go to LA with Kellen Moore. And so I think you're 100% right. Yeah, quarterback's going to be a big-time emphasis. And the next piece of that is putting together a staff that can develop a quarterback, which you know as well as any other Saints fan does. The Saints have not been super successful doing. Developing a quarterback from draft to starter. That hasn't been something they've been super successful doing. And for a long time, so they didn't need to do while they had Drew Brees in the building. You certainly hoped and wished that they did, because then you would have had somewhere to go after Drew Brees. They didn't really have that. They were kind of aimless there at the position. But man, when you have a Spencer Rattler in your quarterback room, when you have a draft class coming up in 2025 that you might be able to find some developmental pieces in, when you have an outstanding draft coming up in 2026 to the position, yeah, you want to have that coaching staff ready to develop those guys. And I think that's what you're seeing here.
Now, you brought up the not necessarily needing to develop a quarterback while Drew was here. You're right. And you said some of us wish we would have, 2016, 2017, that would have been nice to, draft a guy to sit for a couple of years before, because, you knew by about the 2017, 2018 mark that Drew's days were very numbered.
Mm-hmm.
You would have liked to see some kind of emphasis put there on developing a quarterback, but it just didn't shake out that way. Look, Doug Nussmeier is going to be your offensive coordinator. Supposedly his son's pretty good. He's got 1 more year left of college ball. I don't know. I'm just saying it might work out that way. Ross, let's flip to the defensive side. Obviously, with Kellen Moore being an offensive-minded head coach, the defensive coordinator is going to be such a massive hire. What are you hearing? What's the latest? Where do the Saints stand on who their defensive coordinator is going to be? I know the likely choice is Brandon Staley due to Kellen Moore's previous relationship with him, but how close is that to actually being a reality?
Yeah, I think there's a good chance that we end up hearing more about that in the coming days leading up to the combine. I think that's kind of the timeline that you're looking for here. Is it necessary for you to have your coaching staff completely built out by the time you get to the combine? It's really actually kind of not. Like, that's a scouting thing more than it is a coach thing. But as long as you have your defensive coordinator in place, then I think that ends up kind of moving the needle, and it allows you to have another guy that could be in those meetings and stuff like that. So you'd like for that to be the case. Is it a game? No, not really. But we'll see where things go. But I do expect that that'll move pretty quickly here over the course of the next or those days leading up to the combine. I think Brandon Staley very much is still the favorite in this situation. He hired Kellen Moore as his offensive coordinator in LA. Now Kellen Moore gets the opportunity to return the favor. But beyond that, I think that it's a good move for a first-time head coach to have a former head coach on their staff. I think that's a good move. Whether for better or for worse, being able to have that ex-head coach be able to look at you and say, hey, here are the things that worked, here are the things that didn't work. Right? You're doing this. I might consider this. Like, whatever that might be in terms of that feedback, I think that makes sense. And when you have an offensive head coach that's super focused on what's happening over on the offensive side, having a guy with head coaching experience to run the other side of the scheme for you, I think that's a really good move too. And so I think Staley's a good hire if the Saints are able to pull that off. Number one defense, total defense, number one scoring defense, number one passing defense, number three. I think they were top 5 rushing defense when he was a defensive coordinator with the Rams in LA. And then I know things kind of fell off a little bit for him, just saying it lightly, when he was with Los Angeles Chargers. But a lot of that was like game management stuff. It was just, there are these guys that are better coordinators than head coaches. It's what we said about Dennis Allen for a long time. It's what we say about Matt Eberflus. And I think it's what you can pretty comfortably say about Brandon Staley as well. Young, innovative, two-front defense, but with a focus on the odd front. I think that that's something that the Saints could benefit from, even if it doesn't happen right away in 2025, just continuing to build a little bit of like the exotic nature of your defense over the course of the next few years. I think it's a great move. And so I think that that's really good. But I do want to highlight Christian Parker too, who also interviewed, as the experience of the Saints like at defensive backs or with defensive backs.
So the other big piece of news out of the NFL has been the salary cap increase. And I think you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
So the NFL has notified their teams that the salary cap is going to increase anywhere from 22 to 27 million a year. How important is that for the Saints being in the worst cap situation in the league?
With them being in the worst cap situation in the league, which is true, they end up being the biggest benefactor of this. The salary cap expectation in terms of rising was really kind of around like $275 million, somewhere around that area. And now what they're saying is that the bottom is $2 million more than the maximum of what was anticipated. When you're a team that already has a bunch of money to spend, here's what happens. I get a 20% raise, but then everyone else that I work with also gets a 20% raise. We're all spending money in the same thing. Those prices, we run everybody else's prices up. It's not like we ever got that 20 million, that 20%.
For sure.
But if I'm in debt, $100, and my credit card company and says, hey, buddy, great news, we're raising your credit limit $20, I'll take that. I still got to pay $80 back. That's $20 I don't have to pay back anymore. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so logically, and through the throes of the NFL, how free agency works, how more salary cap money drives up market demand, contract demand, all this other stuff, right? Every player goes, oh, you got a 20% raise? I want 20% more, whatever that might be. The team at the bottom benefits the best from this because it's less money they have to pay back.
For sure.
And that's the situation that New Orleans Saints are in. So it's going to take them from a situation where they're like $50 million over the salary cap to being high $40 million over the salary cap. But that's a couple less players you got to cut. That's maybe a restructure less you got to do. That's maybe some full restructures that become partial restructures. Like all that moves the needle. All that matters. All that helps. We talk a lot about Derek Carr's contract, and if you restructure his contract, you save $30 million. Maybe, if you want to. But now this kind of frees you up to have more freedom, right? Do you want to instead designate him a post-June cut and you're willing to wait till June 2nd to realize that cap relief? Do you want to try to put it on the market, see if you can trade him, save $11.3 million because you also saved $8 million not having to do anything because the salary cap was higher than you expected. You walk away with a net savings of $19 million if you want to look at it that way. Depends on how you want to do the math, right? So I think that it just kind of gives them a little bit more freedom, opens up some more options, opens up more things that they can do to get not only salary cap compliant, but also get the money to spend in free agency should they desire to go that route.
So as it stands right now, 5:20 on February 20th, is Derek Carr the quarterback of the New Orleans Saints in 2025?
It's so funny. If you asked me that question maybe a week ago, I would say yes, he is the quarterback. In fact, I have. I think Super Bowl night was the last time somebody asked me that question. And I said, yeah, Derek Carr is probably the quarterback. Now, I'm not so sure. Kellen Moore got 3 different opportunities to say, Derek Carr is our quarterback. Now, granted, he never said Derek Carr ain't our quarterback, right? But he never said Derek Carr is our quarterback. He was given several opportunities to do so. When he was asked about Alvin Kamara, he was like, oh, yeah, no, Alvin's been a big part of what it is that they do, and he'll continue to be a big part of what it is that we do. Oh, that's very different, right? And so I think I have to go with possibly not. Like, I can't say yes or no, unfortunately, because I think the thing that's most important is that the Saints do what it is that that Kellen Moore wants. And that it can't be the organization saying, well, we're paying this, so we have to do this, whatever. Whatever it is that Kellen Moore wants, that's what the organization needs to do. To me, that's the most important thing. So we'll see what it is that Kellen Moore wants to do at the position. But man, I'm telling you, if you asked me that question a week ago, I would say yes. I can't say yes right now because I have no idea which way it's going to go. And I'm not sure Kellen Moore did when he was asked those questions either, if I'm being honest. I don't know that he exactly knew where it was going, but it doesn't feel like as sure a thing as it once felt at one time.
Correct me if you feel, or disagree with me if you feel differently. Mm-hmm. Super Bowl week, watching Jameis be, everywhere in the city of New Orleans.
Way the time of his life.
Watching Drew Brees being involved in the city of New Orleans. Hell, Sean Payton was involved in the city of New Orleans during the Super Bowl. And Derek Carr being nowhere to be found was incredibly telling for me.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm looking into that too much. Maybe he just wanted to get out of town to avoid the massive people and take his family on a vacation. I don't know. But him not being anywhere when Brian Brzee was walking around Radio Row, Derek Carr was nowhere.
I thought that Brian Brzee, Rasheed was out there. I saw Spencer Rattler was out there. I talked to Blake Grupe. Like, yeah, it was weird. Nowhere to be found. And look, some might say, well, 90-something% of the roster also wasn't out there to be found. That's fair. But Derek Carr knows the noise, that he doesn't have a connection with the city. Here was an opportunity for you to go and do that. Derek Carr is the quarterback of the franchise. Show your face, right? Like, that's the expectation from this city when it comes to their connection with this team. And juxtapose that even further to Kellen Moore in his introductory press conference, who said the phrase "Who Dat Nation" twice in 30 seconds. Made sure that he positioned himself and said, I'm going to call you by your name. I want you to know I see you as a fan base. Had the king cake question or answer ready. I was very well prepared. But you juxtapose that to the absence of Derek Carr, who the last thing that he ended up posting on social media at one point early in the month was move back to California. Man, this is really cool. Somebody made this edit for me. I can't believe I'm still enjoying this after 11 years. Sure. But where you at? You know what I mean? And I think that that's the question that a lot of Saints fans were asking. Could there be a very good reason why he wasn't around? 100%. Absolutely no doubt. Could be a family thing. Could be, like you said, a vacation, whatever it might be. But man, like, the chatter. Like, you can't pretend like you don't. The chatter. And so here was an opportunity for you to be able to maybe smooth some of that over, come and be a part of the community, come and celebrate what was an enormous week for New Orleans. And as somebody that is born and raised here and that watched this city thrive and absolutely crush hosting a Super Bowl.
Oh, killed it.
Killed it. To the point to where they're like, an NHL team might work. You know what I mean? Like, don't put everything in New Orleans.
Don't you worry. We're going to get to that in a second. Don't you worry.
So, like, now they're like, they're going to put everything in New Orleans. And good. But when you're the face of the franchise that most represents the connection, right? One of the most unique connections between community and team in sports, you should probably show your face. And I understand the criticism around that. I would understand, like, actual reason for why that wouldn't be the case. But until we have that, I completely understand the criticism. And I completely understand the, in some cases, concern when it comes to the city of New Orleans looking at their quarterback.
I'm going to get to the NHL team in Louisiana thing here. I'm also going to give you to make a pick on tonight's Four Nations final between the U.S. and Canada.
Great.
Because I am a hockey fanatic. But a couple more things on the Saints. And I want to go to Taysom Hill now because He is, I've seen many people call him the heart and soul of this team. And, I think that it's true. He is the juice. He is the energy, right? But he is 35 years old. He is coming off of a devastating knee injury. There is a real possibility that Taysom Hill does not play for the New Orleans Saints in 2025, whether it be a cut or whether they decide to trade him to the New Orleans Saints of the AFC, being the Denver Broncos. How likely do you think it is on a scale of 1 to 10 that Taysom Hill does not play for the Saints in 2025? And what do you think is the likely avenue that the Saints would go to move on from him?
Well, I think the first question we have to ask is he able to play in 2025? You mentioned a devastating injury. That devastating injury happened in December.
Correct.
And an ACL injury with no further damage takes 9 to 12 months to a calendar year to recover from. But then you think about the potential for additional knee damage, whether it be MCL, PCL, whatever, right? And then you take into account the age. We're about an average return time of 9 to 12 months when you're going on 35 years old and you've had several debilitating knee injuries throughout your career, for sure, going back to college. The first question we have to ask is he going to be able to be on the field in 2025 at all? So I think that's the first thing they got to get figured out. If they can get that figured out and the answer is yes, he'll be on the field, then I think he stays in New Orleans. Like, I have a hard time seeing Kellen Moore, who really likes disguise, who really likes to move things around before the snap, who really likes all this kind of stuff, to look at one of your best disguised pieces and say, nah, I don't want him. You know what I mean? The only question would be if you're just trying to get a year ahead in case, he can get back to the field, but he's not going to be as effective as he once was. Like, that would be the other formula to figure out, or piece of the equation, whatever math analogy you want to use. I'm not a math guy. I'm a football guy. Yeah, man. And so I think you got to figure that stuff out first. If the Saints and Taysom Hill are going to part ways, I would imagine a post-June 1 designation and cut would be the way that they go about it. It takes them from saving no money to saving $10 million. And if that happens, it's because they're trying to get a year ahead. Yeah, you can trade him and you can potentially get draft capital back, but I don't think you're going to get much. And on top of that, you're giving away an opportunity to help you get under the salary cap. The other option is, okay, he's not going to be ready to go until November. Can you approach him or his people and adjust his contract based on that? You know what I mean? Sure. So there's like these other pieces that you can kind of look at to figure things out. And so I think it's a lot of like, I get it. It's popular to say like, these are these like aggregators that are just connecting former coaches and players over the offseason and going, hey, this is a thing that could make sense. And then, it picks up from there. But I don't know that there's anything solid right now that says that the Saints are looking to move on or deal Taysom Hill. I think the big question really is he going to be healthy enough to even go in 2025?
What about Cam Jordan?
Thing one.
I've heard his name kind of get thrown around as a potential cap casualty, but again, he's a guy that he's a veteran to this locker room. He's a veteran to this organization. He's the Saints' all-time leader in sacks. That's a hard guy to look at and say, hey man, we can't afford to have you here anymore.
Yeah.
Like, how does that situation work if you're Mickey Loomis?
I think it depends too on not just Mickey Loomis and the money, whoever the defensive coordinator is in the defense, right? What's the ability to be able to utilize him? What's his role? What's his percentage of snaps as you look ahead? And then how does a $12 million, $1.5 million guaranteed base salary look against that? Can you say, okay, we have this new defensive coordinator who's bringing in this new system that's going to use you a different way than what we originally paid you for, and it's going to use you less than we originally paid you in anticipation of. So we're going to look at reworking your contract with your people. And then you seek a pay cut effectively, or reduce pay, or move the money around in some other way that's creative, necessarily a restructure. And so I think that's probably the more likely thing. If that doesn't work, then I think you could see a world in which a split happens. But I think the first door will always be open, or should always be open, for Cam Jordan to return to New Orleans, not return, stay in New Orleans, and finish his career here in the Big Easy.
Yeah, there's for the last couple of years now, there's been talks of, the Saints should trade Cam Jordan and blah, blah. Nah, man. Cam Jordan is here as long as he wants to be here.
Right.
If Cam Jordan comes into the office and says, I want to play for 17 years, I'm going to find a way to keep him on the payroll for 17 years.
Yeah. He ain't going to get paid a lot, but I'll pay you.
I'll pay you.
Yeah. And so I'm with you 100%. And I think that's the other thing that is oftentimes not taken into consideration with some of these larger salary cap casualty conversations that happen nationally is a lack of understanding for what you and I know, which is not just what he does on the field, but what he means in a locker room, what he means in a meeting, what he means, gathering and building culture, all of the community things. Yeah, into the community. And yeah, exactly. 100%. Great call. And so I think you're looking at all of that, and that is part of your assessment. And I don't think nationally people look at it like that because they kind of just look at dollars, figures, players. But here we know Cam Jordan. Here we know the New Orleans Saints in the way that they kind of go about their business. This doesn't feel like a split that's likely unless they just are simply at odds and are unable to figure out a way in which both sides are happy with some type of moving of the money that allows Cam Jordan to stay here in New Orleans. I think that's the only way that you see any kind of split.
All right, Russ, let's talk about the news that has broken Louisiana social media over the last, 24 to 48 hours.
I didn't know so many people were passionate about hockey. It was actually pretty cool to see.
There has been a report that investors met in New York City with the deputy commissioner of the NHL about bringing a NHL franchise to the city of New Orleans. Now, many things would have to happen for this to work. And the biggest thing would be a major renovation of the Smoothie King Center. I mean, $200 million renovation of the Smoothie King Center. Do you see a world where A, that's possible, and B, could an NHL franchise survive in a city where how do I put this nicely? If you're not the Saints, we don't care.
Yeah. I think it would be tough. I do believe that there is a larger hockey fan base than people realize in the South.
Thank you. I've been saying that all day.
South.
Thank you.
That would travel to see an NHL game. I don't think that that's untrue. I worry that the novelty would wear off if it didn't quickly become a winning franchise, which is really hard to do as an expansion team in the NHL. By the way, I know that we saw the Golden Knights do it. That's not the norm.
Correct. No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. And so that's the one thing that I'm concerned about. The other thing is selling to investors an idea that New Orleans is the right place when an NBA franchise struggles to succeed here. Now, the NBA franchise struggles to succeed here because the NBA franchise does not win games. So you want a fan base, you got to win games. I almost said you got to win football games, but you got to win games. And I think that you've seen that with half-empty Superdomes over the course of the past couple of years too. Let's not forget.
You got to win football games.
Yeah, no one is immune to losing and its effects, right? But I do think that there's a bigger hockey fan base in the Gulf South that would help to supplement what might be a smaller fan base that's specific to New Orleans. People just think about it's a sports franchise in New Orleans, and so only New Orleanians are going to go to it. No. You have a whole region that would travel to do this. So I do think that it's possible. The place that I think things get challenging is you just finished a $560 million renovation to the Caesars Superdome that some taxes are helping to pay for and that the people of New Orleans are helping to pay for and all these other things. Are they going to be able to really do something to the Smoothie King Center that's going to be that subsidized? That's going to be that big, right? And so it would have to come from that ownership group, whether it's that Monroe ownership group that has the minor league teams, whether it's Todd Graves getting involved, whatever it might be. Somebody's got to do something in order for that to happen. But I do think if all the right parties were a part of it, that you would be able to have a Field of Dreams situation, build it, and there will be people that would come.
And, speaking of build it, I've heard multiple people say, well, why not just build an arena? Where? Where are you going?
Space. Space is a really big one. There's some places that you could potentially try to renovate and turn into something.
Correct.
But here's the thing. The Smoothie King Center also needs renovation.
Correct.
Like for the NBA franchise.
Correct.
As you have the opportunity to kill two birds with one stone, then kill two birds with one stone. What I do know, though, or what I understand from the NHL and what we see across the NHL, you've got Atlanta and Houston that are both building new stadiums for an NHL franchise that they want and don't currently have.
Correct.
Like they're building a new stadium. The NHL wants or likes for you to have an independent stadium for your...
Well, yeah, because they don't want to have to worry about scheduling around it.
Right, exactly. It's convenient. It's cheap. It's probably cheaper on their end and all these other things. And so like there's all this other stuff that goes into it. But it's not a necessity. And so we'll see exactly where things go. But I would probably say like Atlanta, Houston, and then Arizona, Phoenix, right, who just lost their franchises. They moved over to Salt Lake. That those three areas are probably more likely to land something first. But expansions typically happen in even numbers. And so if you end up expanding 4 teams, maybe New Orleans gets into the mix. But I think it would be interesting to see if it did work out.
Would it be the New?
I'd also be interested in the name.
Would it be the Jazz?
I don't think you could use the Jazz. Well, yeah, I guess you could, huh?
Yeah, because I mean,
you got Tigers, you got
it's just,
Lions.
It's just different leagues. I don't see why you couldn't use it.
I like that. I was thinking like the Satchmos.
Would that be good too?
Yeah, I mean,
be good too. I like that. We'll bring the Zephyrs back.
Bring the Zephyrs back. Could you bring the Brass back? Could you just call them the New Orleans Brass? Could you just use that name again?
Shit, I guess you could.
That was a sick name.
Yes, it
was a sick logo.
And
that's the only hockey. Yeah, it's the only hockey game I've ever been to, by the way, is Brass game. I've been to like 5 of them things.
So when I was a kid, Lafayette had the ice skaters.
Yeah.
And my mom worked for one of like their presenting sponsors. So we got free tickets from her job, season tickets from her job every year.
But yeah.
So man, like 3 nights a week, we went to almost every game they ever had at the Cajun Dome. It was insane.
I'll tell you,
I've been obsessed with hockey
games. Then I went to Hornets games.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been obsessed with hockey ever since. Actually taking a trip to DC next week just to go to a hockey game. But, I digress. Speaking of hockey, I'll wrap it up with this, Ross. 4 Nations final tonight at the U.S. and Canada. Things got a little chippy over the weekend between these two. 3 fights in 9 seconds and a 3-1 victory for the red, white, and blue. Do we get more of the same tonight?
Exact same story.
Ooh,
I think you're going to get the booing at the anthem.
Yeah, you are.
Right? Is that?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, I think you're going to get that. And I think it's going to be spicy all over again. I think you're going to get the fights. I think you're going to get all of it. And then you're going to get a U.S. victory.
You think
1.5 point favorites going into this one?
You think
take the over?
You think that group chat with the Kachuk brothers has been active this morning?
Lit.
So, boys, round 2, we doing it again?
We ready, everybody?
Man, that's fantastic. I've actually got SportsCenter pulled up right now, watching the preview. It's going to be so great. But look, it's hard to beat Canada, man. Their roster is literally the all-star team. Like,
stacked.
It is.
Yeah, it's crazy. It really is. Like, if you just took that team and then they couldn't play against themselves come all-star time because it's them.
I looked at the line pairings, and it's like Nathan McKinnon, Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid, Devin Taves, Cale Makar. Like, how are those 5 guys on the ice for the same team at the same time? It just doesn't make any sense. But
it's insane. But it's phenomenal hockey. Like, if you're not a hockey fan, if you've never been somebody that has enjoyed hockey or hasn't been able to give hockey a chance, maybe, this is what to watch. This 4 Nations stuff, this is awesome. It's also great hockey. Like, you're going to hear about 3 fights in 9 seconds, which is fantastic. It's a part of the game. But the hockey itself is incredible.
Yeah, it really has been a phenomenal tournament. I mean, I watched Sweden and Finland.
Yeah.
I could care less about either country, but I watched it because it was great hockey.
Yeah.
Ross, look, man, I really appreciate you doing this. Episode number 1 of In the Game in the books, and we'll have to do it many more times when football season rolls around.
100%, man. You let me know where to be, I'll be there.
Make sure you follow us on social media. Look, fancy little graphic right there.
Love that.
X, IG, and Facebook at We Talk Ball 4. And then the same on the YouTube channel as well, We Talk Ball 4. Got a great Four Nations recap coming your way early next week with Elliot Friedman of Sportsnet in Canada. He's going to join me to talk about Four Nations and the final month of the NHL regular season. So stay tuned for that. This has been another episode of In the Game.